So the children may be dismissed to go downstairs for Children's Church. Lord, I thank you for Sarah and her willingness to be used by you and her gifts. Lord, speak through her this morning. Teach us your will and show us your path so we may follow you always. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Good morning. So we're going to look into our scriptures for the lectionary today. And today our topic that kind of was apparent in our scriptures is the topic of suffering. And so I want all of you to engage and be ready to share at the end, because to be honest, while I've had my share of frustrations and times of distress and despair, I haven't experienced intense suffering like I know some of you have. And so I'm very aware that you will have experiences that can inform this morning's conversation and message. So hold on to those pieces as you listen, as you think about this topic of suffering. Be ready to share those thoughts towards the end. To begin, we're going to jump right into our scriptures. We'll start in Job. This week we've been reading different passages through Job. And today in Job 23, verses 1 to, actually it's the whole chapter, 1 to 17, we hear Job's heart. We've listened to different things that his friends have said during the week, and now we get to listen to his reply. Then Job replied, "Even today my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say. Would he oppose me with great power? No, he would not press charges against me. There an upright man could present his case before him, and I would be delivered forever from my judge. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept to his ways without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. But he stands alone, and who can oppose him? He does whatever pleases him. He carries out his decree against me, and many such plans he still has in store. That is why I am terrified before him. When I think of all this, I fear him. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. Yet I am not silenced by the darkness, by the thick darkness that covers my face. Our psalm for today is Psalm 22, and it follows the same line of suffering and questions. Psalm 22, we'll read verses 1 to 15. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from the words of my groaning? O my God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, and am not silent. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the praise of Israel. In you our fathers put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. They cried to you and were saved. In you they trusted and were not disappointed. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by men and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast upon you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls surround me. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Roaring lions tearing their prey, open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted away within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. The thing that we hear in both of these passages is a sense of abandonment. Job says, if only I could find the way to his dwelling. If I look in the east, he's not there. If I look in the west, he's not there. If I look in the north and the south, I don't see him. Job describes his suffering as being covered by thick darkness. And David in this psalm, we don't know exactly what David was going through when he wrote this, but David in this psalm is crying out, God, why have you forsaken me? And also recognizing that there is no one here to help. Do you know that the word trauma in like psychology land, trauma is a response, not an event. The same event can be traumatic to some people and not traumatic to other people. So if there's a traumatic, so in psychology speak, they don't talk about traumatic events, they talk about a traumatic response. And I think that's so often what happens is, one person might be in a car accident, it's hard, it's painful, it's scary, but it's not something that keeps them stuck for the rest of their lives. Other people, a car accident is horribly traumatic. And so often it has to do with our sense of being alone and being isolated, being separated from God, becoming unattached to our communities or to God. We have 2 stories in our family that I got permission from my boys to share about injuries that happened. Josh, when he was 4 years old, we were playing in the lake, passing a boat back and forth between us, a big kind of, it was like a remote control boat, but we weren't using the remote control feature, just passing it on the water. And a wave came and took it and slammed it into Josh's mouth, split his lip open, and we had to take him to the local emergency room to get it stitched up. So it was scary, it was painful, but everything was going okay until in the operating room, they had him stretched out on the table, and they took a white piece of cloth with just a hole in it so that they could isolate the site, and they put the white cloth over his face, and it changed for Josh in that minute, and he went from being whimpering and crying to being terrorized, and and Jared and I had to hold him down on either side of the table, and it was awful. And for the next year after that, when he would get hurt, he would not let me see it. I remember really clearly, one time specifically, he got cut above the eye, and he would just hold it like this, no, don't look, don't look. And I'm frantic, I don't know how bad this is, you gotta let me look, you gotta let me see it. And no. And I said, buddy, why can't you show me your wound? I wanna help you. And he said, because then you might take me to the doctors, and then I won't be able to see what's happening, and I won't know where you are, and I won't know what's going on. And I realized, as we talked about, where is this coming from, that this experience in the hospital where they put this white sheet over his face, he felt completely alone. He didn't know where we were, and he didn't know what was going on. And that fear kept him from even being able to show me his wound to let me help him get the attention that he needed. And that's kind of stands in contrast to Luke. When Luke was 4, he fell out of a tree and broke his arm. And, it was painful. It was scary for all of us. But I remember driving to the hospital and, Luke's head kind of lolling back in the car seat and looking at me and saying, Mom, I don't know how much I can take this pain. I don't know how much longer I can take this pain. And I just remember locking eyes with him and saying, I know, but Mom and Dad are here with you. We're here, and we're taking you to get help. And I think Luke had a completely different experience because, he was with us. He could see us. And Luke said when we were talking about these stories, like, yeah, I remember being able to see you the whole time. Even when you had to step out of the room for them to reset my arm, I could see you because it was a glass enclosure at Hershey. So I wonder how many of us in our circumstances and events of pain and suffering and fear and confusion, can you kind of hold those in front of you and think about, did you feel abandoned by God, by people? Did you get stuck in that place? Or did you know, this hurts, this is hard, but we can keep moving? Because when we're securely attached to God in our community, our pain will still hurt, and we'll still have lots of questions, but we'll be able to move through our suffering with resilience towards healing. But when we're convinced that we have been forsaken, we'll be stuck in our suffering and our development and growth. And just like little Josh, we'll run and hide our pain and keep it from God and from our community. And we see this is so interesting because if you think about here in Psalm 22, David is crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? Well, the very next chapter in Psalm 23, he says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for what? For you are with me. So even David, we see him shifting back and forth from a place of abandonment and trauma and confidence and security based on his knowledge that God is with him. So how do we stay securely attached to God through our suffering? Our New Testament passage is found in Hebrews, and we're going to turn there. Hebrews 4. We're going to start at Hebrews 4:14 and read down through some of chapter 5. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Every high priest is selected from among men and is appointed to represent them in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. This is why he has to suffer sacrifice for his own sins as well as for the sins of the people. No one takes this honor upon himself. He must be called by God, just as Aaron was. So Christ also did not take upon himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son, today I have become your father." And he says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." Listen up to this part. This is crucial. During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So how do we connect with God? How do we attach to God even though we have to go through suffering? It's through Jesus. It's because Jesus came, left his throne of glory to suffer. He can empathize with our weaknesses, and he knows what we're going through so that we can approach him and know that we will be acceptable to him because of what he did. That no matter what, no matter how bad our experiences are, no matter how bad we behave, we can be accepted because of what Jesus did. And when we join with Christ and attach with Christ in our suffering, we learn obedience, just like Christ did, because of his suffering and because of his submission. We become perfect along with Christ. And so then suffering can produce all this fruit in our lives that we wouldn't be able to have otherwise. Instead of suffering being traumatic, suffering produces growth and a nearness to God that we wouldn't otherwise know. But sometimes, in the midst of suffering, all of that is rather abstract and kind of hard to hold on to and cling to. So when we can't find our way to attaching to God in our suffering, then what do? We find our way to attaching to the body of Christ in our midst, to the people of God around us. How do we foster this secure bond between each other? How do we be Jesus with skin on for each other in the midst of suffering? So I want to spend a few minutes giving you some really tangible points for how to be with somebody who is suffering. So if you're a note taker, here's the time to get out your pencil. These aren't. I found a lot of help in reading an article by Becky Sweat from the Discern magazine, and she kind of helped to organize some of my thoughts in a very concise way. I'm taking from what she wrote, but we also see this in Hebrews when we look at how Christ relates to us. We learn from Christ how to relate to each other. So I want to talk first about 4 things that you don't do when you're with somebody who is suffering. The first thing is that you don't dismiss their suffering. You don't dismiss what they're feeling. You don't say things like, "Don't worry about it," or "Don't cry over that," or "Look on the bright side." I know we have some bright side lookers in this in this church, and being grateful is a wonderful thing to have as a part of our life. But when somebody's in the midst of suffering, we suffer with them. We sit with them and make space for them to actually experience what they're going through. We don't make the focus about us. We don't say, "Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I know just what you're feeling because one time I lost my job too, and this is how I felt, and this is how I got through it." And nope. We listen to them. We let them, again, experience the suffering that they're going through. We don't offer unsolicited advice. This isn't the time to fix the situation. This isn't the time to... Again, because even trying to fix the situation for someone is a way of dismissing what they're going through. Instead of saying, "Wow, this hurts," to say, "Well, go look for another job," or "Go get involved with another church or another group," or whatever. The point is that we create space for people to experience what they're feeling so that they can move on. But if we don't ever experience what the event has made us feel, it'll just build and keep us stuck and hooked. But we become that person to whom they can expose their feelings. We become like Christ that says, "You can have confidence to approach me because I won't turn you away and I won't push you on and I won't drag you away from this pain. I'll sit with it with you." And very importantly, too, we don't dish out correction. And this is a hard one for me, especially with my kids. Whenever you see that somebody did something and they're suffering for like an obvious bad choice that they made, pointing that out it's not effective. It's not the time in the midst of suffering. There's time for correction. There's time for helping someone see how their choices affect their life. But in the fire of suffering is not the time to dish out correction. So the 4 things not to do: don't dismiss the sufferer's feelings. Don't make yourself the focus. Don't offer unsolicited advice. And don't dish out correction. Now, there's 3 things that we can do. One of them, the biggest one, is to listen and try to feel what the other person is feeling. But we listen and we ask questions that help them to continue to explore their own experience and their own beliefs that are surfacing in the times of suffering. Number 2, we accept the situation for what it is. If somebody is like making these statements like, "Well, I just can't believe in God anymore," or I just can't stay with my husband after what he did," or whatever it is, don't freak out at their statements. This is them in a specific time and place processing through what has happened to them. Don't get caught up in, oh, no, you should believe in God. You have to believe in God, or you should never, Just respond understandingly. You've been through so much. It's understandable why you might feel that way right now. Accept them for where they're at in this specific situation. So accept the situation for what it is. Accept the person for what they're going through. And the biggest thing, number 3, is remind sufferers that they are not alone. We're with them. We can't fix it. We can't change it, but we're with them in that situation. And we empathize with them with our body language, with our facial expressions. If they're crying, we weep with them, or we at least solicit that expression on our face. We sit with them in their pain, and we're just with them together. I remember. I think I was like in middle school, so I was too old to be scared of the dark. But for whatever reason, I don't know if I watched a scary movie. I have no idea what it was, but I was scared. I remember going to bed, and it's ridiculous because I even shared a room with my 3 sisters, but they were probably all asleep. They're all younger than me, and I was laying there awake. And I finally went down and woke my dad up and was like, "Dad, I'm really scared. Like somebody's gonna break in or something's gonna happen." And my dad, like, he's done after maybe 9 o'clock. Like, there's no talking with Dad after 9. I mean, even when the whole family gets together now, he'll sit out there and try to, like, engage with us, but he falls asleep. So this may have been due to that, but he, instead of, like, what are you scared about or anything like that, he just said, all right, come on back to bed. I'll lay with you for a while. So I remember laying there back to back with my dad in my single bed, and suddenly it wasn't so scary. Did I really think that my dad could, like, take on a gunman if somebody broke into the house? Not really. But just the fact that Dad was there with me. The dark was still dark. Something bad could still happen. But having the comfort of another person made the difference, and I could fall asleep. So, the 3 things that we try to pay attention to when we're with someone who is suffering. We listen, we accept them for where they're at, and we remind them that they're not alone.